Welcome back to Tug of Heart. Before we get going, this is a great time to stop and recognize Strong Island Radio, Strong Island Entertainment. Thank you, huge thank you for your support and your tolerance as we stumble through conversations between twin siblings, just trying to make sense of what we do and why we do it and where our heart is the healthiest. Today we're going to chat a little bit about disillusionment. Disillusionment is a feeling of disappointment resulting from the discovery that something is not as good as one believed it to be. The reason we're going to talk about that is because we are living in a time of absolute, there's a word for it, but it's escaping me. There's also not as bad as we think it is sometimes. And this is coming off a chat we had a little bit ago about destitution. So in destitution, we discover rough times, but we also discover unity and practicality and true value of possessions, of friendships, of health, of safety. So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a game of polarizing, depending on how we look at it. Lori, welcome. I don't want this to be a sad day, but we're going to talk about things in the most uplifting of spirits, if possible.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Hi, Leroy. Good to be with you. I love you, and I always like to have this time.
That's nice. I haven't heard that in about 20 years.
Even when I've really, is that how we want to open up? Really?
It's good. It feels like 20 years if it's been a day.
A good recovery. I was just going to say that's an illusion, and I would have to disillusion you, which actually kind of points to the idea that the sometimes the answer is right inside the word there, like the Matrix, right? Would you rather live in? I just thought of this now, so I hope I frame this right. Would you rather live in a pseudo illusion of life, or be disillusioned and wake up cold and in great need from our last show, desolation, but grounded in reality, which is better? And so this isn't a breakdown of that movie, but to talk about what happens when we become aware of some illusions we hold and they're destroyed. And what are we left with, especially if we've gone and had some idea or vision of the way things work. And we've done an awful lot of work based on that, a lot of building on it. And then that base is just kind of yanked out from under you. What are you left with? I had actually asked that should we just tell them the truth, how we wound up on this? Leroy gave me the wrong topic on purpose, or I misunderstood the word. So I had looked this up last night. I was too tired to look up much more, but I did come across the World Economic Forum has put out the Global Risks Report for the youth of today. Okay. And so this is a list of 10 immediate risks that the young face today. Number 8 is disillusionment. We don't even talk about this. And this is very dangerous. And they had mentioned that teens are facing like a second global crisis in a decade. This is just at the point, I'm assuming, of the pandemic. I don't think this includes, looking at the eve of a World War III, maybe, or maybe not. But there was this kind of deterioration among them since the pandemic started. And then they're very vulnerable to depression, anxiety. And then that's also when they become, I guess, targets for, extreme views on things that radicalizing, which we won't talk about because depends which side you're on, you think the other's radical. But, ideally, I think most parents would hope for balance in their children, not too much of one or the other. So before the pandemic, we were already seeing violence on the rise and a lot of social disruptions, a lot of tension, right? Anyways, the bottom line is, how do kids and us, how do we become like somehow better equipped for these kinds of challenges when we wake up one day and discover something has happened in the world, some news event, and that means that the way we kind of thought things work isn't quite the way it's actually happening? And where does that leave us, Leroy? That's the kickoff point, I guess.
So what I'm going to tell you right off the bat is disillusionment. Right off, I like to do things in quirky little ways. Safety, security, and satisfaction. Ooh,
I'm writing.
Satisfaction. Disillusionment. We can live. I think that's the most dangerous one, because we can live our life quite content, and it's not until we discover. When I say we, I'm not talking about anybody. We only reflect on our own lives and hope that it makes sense in some way. But we have a car, we have a bike, we have good shoes. I mean, whatever it is, and we're satisfied. And it's really dangerous, because with the introduction of social media, television, commercials, the gold standard, it's not until we find out that there's more to life than a 10-foot aluminum boat. There's bigger boats, there's yachts, there's boats with little boats called tenders, and so it's funny, because disillusionment can also be our own satisfaction, which I think is a really, really dangerous one. Also, our safety. We go day to day, unaware, just absolutely unaware. And then we see, I think we can all agree, it was just tragic to see the 2021 riots and looting and burning, and just a absolute disregard for authority, rules, people's possessions, people's safety. I mean, breaking windows, disrespect. I mean, there was a disillusionment. Up until that, there's a lot of people that didn't realize that there was an element that felt so wronged that they would execute a movement that was far worse than the perceived wrong.
Right.
And I'm not here to qualify their feelings. I'm just saying that, I mean, many lives were lost, which is the very thing they're protesting. I mean, and I don't know what their reasons are. I try to understand it, but there's a disillusionment there in our safety. Security. We're going to go back again. You think about the crash of the stock market. You think about this war-torn country, and there was an illusion that they were secure, and then they discovered no, that's not actually the case. I mean, it's you use the word last topic, fragile. Mm-hmm. We think we're healthy. I mean, we're flesh. We're fragile.
Yep.
Super fragile. So as I kind of bring these three topics up, safety, security, and satisfaction, all of which most of us have been disillusioned multiple times with our safety, multiple times with our security, and multiple times with our satisfaction. We're satisfied with something until we see something else, and then we want something else, and that's what we call moving the goalposts. However, I also want to say that once, the reality of disillusionment is discovered, how then do we trust ourselves in the future with new comforts?
Wow, I like that.
Because we were wrong. Everything we believe in, we would have, placed a wager on our security, our safety, our satisfaction. And then we find out it is not so. So how do we trust ourselves after that?
Right. I'm going to just start by clarifying for any naysayers when you're talking about the movement that was worse than the wrong. We are talking about disillusionment. So in the sense that it can be very disillusioning to realize that the consequence of one person's actions leads to an invasion of my home. And that's very disillusioning. And I just want to clarify that it's more damaging in that way. Go ahead.
Yeah, I clarifying is a good word. This doesn't have anything to do with the movement. Their reasons and justifications are their own. What this has to do with is our perceived sense of safety.
Right. So if somebody does something in another state on another side of the country, my safety comes into question. That's an awakening I wasn't prepared for.
Right. And also the people that were the people in the immediate proximity, their safety was jeopardized. The people that were in government buildings that were burned, their safety. I'm not here to question, promote, or even judge what happened, but more to reflect on the safety of the people affected by that.
We're not talking about the end they're hoping for, but just the cost of the means to get there. And what it did. In fact, I had posted at one time, this all happened at the start of the pandemic, when I was desperately wanting a particular treatment for Seth. And because of something that had happened that I like to believe, we're you and I are both in interracial, forever relationships and anything. So I would have thought that justice is given to those in deserving of justice, and come to find out that we were unable to get to some treatment when we wanted to save a little boy's life because of something that I probably wouldn't have stood for in the first place. And that disillusioned me somewhat because it left this feeling of, how can that be? How can this be? This isn't us. Why does the consequence fall on me? Whatever it is, when you said the reality is discovered, how do we trust ourselves in the future? And that's right, because we were kind of in life, we're banking on our ability to work within the world, survive within the world. And all of a sudden, it can change a lot. So how do we recover? I actually had wrote a couple, it was 3, but then I thought of 4. This isn't a good list. It's not a complete list. It was my start where I thought things we could possibly look at. When you find out your view of the world, that it's actually been your own projection on the world, and it's not how it necessarily works. How do we go about recovering our footing, if you want to call it that? And one was like, you adapt to the new reality, no longer associated with your previous illusion. So in that sense, you change yourself to align with the world. Or if you insist on your own, you change the world. If you think like, well, that's not right, it's flawed. There's consequences to both. The other is just to accept what it means to not be in sync with the world. And you're going to spend a life at odds with the world because you hold to your position. And these are actual choices I think people make. The last choice is to have a willingness to learn what this means in the bigger scheme of things. What does this point to about, for us, the bigger picture being like in terms of the heart, what does this mean about me and what does this mean about my neighbor? I have more information now about how things work. What does this mean for my life philosophy, my purpose, my personal development? And would knowing make things better, Leroy, anyways? Does it matter when you're disillusioned? Do we choose to even recover from it, or do we spend our life disappointed with life? Because some do. And what do you think separates those that continually pick themselves up versus the ones that do not? And actually, this is the core answer for children. How to help them through this is the answer is usually resilience, which means, yeah, you're going to get knocked down a lot. You get up, so what makes the difference in your mind between choosing to get up or just enough? I can't do this.
To answer this, for me to answer this, I'd have to go back to a previous podcast you and I shared, and it had to do with perception.
Okay.
There are chronic or habitually offended by life's inequity, life's lack of fairness, even the depth of the color of your neighbor's lawn.
Right.
Dad used to tell me, he said, grass is always green on the other side of the fence because their water bills double. We fail to look at that. When we're disillusioned, I think one of the things is, to begin with, the first thing that happens when I'm disillusioned, or I have been in my life, and I think about it, I'm like, wow. It's kind of like when you lose your sense of direction. You're like, how could I be that far off? Well, the first thing that takes a small ding is your ego.
Yeah.
Because you're like, wow, and there's no denying it. You were going the wrong way. You were just wrong. Right. So, but there's a lot to be said. I'm going to go back to the word fragile, Lori. Mm-hmm. We're fragile as physical beings, but we're also fragile mentally. And we have to, I say we, not everybody, but you and I have to become more comfortable in that spot where we're fragile, and we recognize we're fragile. But you know what we are? We're improving.
Right.
We're moving forward. And that's good, because as we exercise an awareness of our perception, we don't got to get it right. We don't have to perceive things the way they are, absolutely. And you and I will argue about this, because you say there's truth and there's not truth. But truth is not necessarily universal. The truths, somebody could say, man, that's freezing cold, that's impossible. But then you'll see somebody else who's part of the polar bear club, and they enter the lake through a chipped out hole in the ice, and it's quite bearable. That both of them are right. They're both talking about the truth, but the truth is just not universal. There's not a universal application of the truth, because it means different things to different people. And as soon as we realize, we being you and I, Lori, as soon as we realize that we're fragile, mentally we're fragile, then I think it gets a little bit easier. And if we maintain an awareness about our perceived reality, I think it gets a little bit easier.
So let me ask you this question, Leroy. Think about it in your heart of heart and tell me this, because I'm asking for my own knowing, because I don't.
With ranch dressing.
Got it. Who then it sounds like you're saying it's an inside job when we have the responsibility then when the world doesn't line up with the world we thought it was. Is that our responsibility, or in part the world's? Because what if we do have a pretty reasonable, truthful view of how things, let's say, ought to be, and then they're not? How would you, like, what would be the gauge to sift, sort, like you say, and know what's what then?
Well, okay.
Is that my burden for starters?
I think, a word that you and I used to use a lot that we probably stopped using as much as we should is consider. Mm-hmm. Consider. We have to consider different things. I was looking at when you first invited me to join you on Tug of Heart, I was looking around, and one of the things that hit me way back then, and I said, I'm going to stick this in my little pocket and I'm going to save it for another time. Now is that time. Our most downtrodden is like 15 times wealthier than others in other countries. So even our most destitute
in this country,
in America,
okay,
relative to other countries, is 15 or 20 times. I don't hold me to it. I mean, many times over,
high on the wealth,
more well off.
Yeah.
So when we think, oh my gosh, we got it wrong, I mean, maybe we just happen to be in the wrong country. Oh my gosh, I thought I had it great. And then I met somebody who really had it great. And now we move the benchmark. Oh, because I guarantee you this, there are a lot of people in a lot of countries that would look at us and they'd be like, they would literally, they must, in their limited access to, to social media or news or whatever. I bet you there's a lot of people that look at us, all of us, the average American, and they say, this is mind-boggling. How can somebody have so much and yet there's so many that go without? Does that make sense?
It does.
There's we think we have it hard, but if you were to see it from somebody else's, I bet you people have prayed, God, why did you give everything to them? And here we are carrying water so far to grow a bean. Well, there's disillusionment and how bad we have it if we were to discover other people. But then you may look at them and you may look at their lifespan because they don't suffer from obesity and they walk and they exercise and they do carry that water 1.5 miles and they have health that we wouldn't even begin to understand.
Right.
So they could be disillusioned.
Yeah.
So again, perception is a big factor here. They're disillusioned about how good we are. We have it so good, we kill ourselves early because we don't exercise. We're lethargic. We're sedentary. Like that's how good we have it. We have it so good, we chop 20 years off our life. That's how good we have it.
I tell Steve often that it amazes me that in the most mundane, casual of days that we have here afford us more comforts than kings from years ago. They did not experience the comfort we do. Nowhere close. They did not experience the variety of food, the correct temperatures, the free time, the tools.
Oreos.
Yeah. I was going to just point out one thing. It's funny when you and I each are speaking about disillusionment, because when I think of disillusionment, I immediately was picturing the world falling short of something that I thought it was. And when you're speaking of it, you're talking about instead of seeing the world as falling short, it's seeing me and what is mine as falling short because I have a different point of reference in the world. And I think that just points to this idea that disillusionment can be about ourselves or about the world that we find ourselves in. And so one of the things that you would want to do, like just to eliminate some disillusionment immediately by what you were saying is get this idea. Any pictures you see of some kind of weird utopia, the perfect society, wrong comparison, buddy. Dystopia, the worst, the most defective society we can imagine. Don't compare to that either. It is somewhere in the middle. And then you were asking about, what about when people say, well, how do they have this much and I don't, and justice and equal rights, and people, why is there a difference among people? One of the things that might be hard for some people to take, but this is where I am. And so I accept any criticism of it, or acceptance or rejection, because it's still just the way I see things truly from my heart right now, that we get into all these tangles of, we see even the worst of it, where people are actually going to slaughter people for land because they want this share of land. And I think when you're talking about the heart, we make this mistake where if we're comparing what people have to ourselves, we kind of have already missed something, in that anything we talk about for justice, like that you're talking about dividing in shares. Oh, if you have this much food, I have less. If I can take this much, you take this much. Anything that we talk about, as far as that goes, what we take from that pot decreases the pot. But when you're talking about the heart, and I guess I would even say the spirit, the soul, things that are a little bit more supernatural, these are things that you would take from, and it doesn't remove a thing from the pot. If somebody is high in virtue, there's not less virtue available for another person. These are things we can control. If I strive to be good, it does not cost another person any good. If I am surrounded with love, it's not for somebody being shy of love somewhere else. And that's why, as Christians, we're told to focus on these things, and the rest just kind of takes care of itself. Now, I don't know the belief system for everybody, and for those that don't believe in anything supernatural, but I think even in a natural way, without taking a higher look at it, whether or not they believe in it, just from the heart, wouldn't you say that the things that we would want to really focus on taking more of should be things that it's no cost, it's only benefit to everybody else, the more I attain of this, right?
I hate to be the purveyor of disillusionment.
Go on.
But America was founded on taking.
Right. That's
But I like what you're saying, Lori. I like what you're saying.
It was.
In that, I like what you're saying, in that Dad used to say, snuffing out another man's candle doesn't bring more light. Your candle only gives off the light it gives off. And, snuffing out his candle doesn't make yours brighter.
Right. But
it is only.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's only through sharing that light, spreading that light, lighting more candles, so to speak, do we create more light. And more light would be a synonym for awareness, understanding, education, definition.
And I am going to say, like, when we say like America began by taking land, that's on one level of it. And had people found disillusionment in that, and obviously they have, because we speak of it to this day, but in a true sense, a true feeling that this is an injustice, how much land was transferred probably the last, let's say, 20 years in similar manner? So much that we don't even hear about. But so is the disillusionment about this past event, or does it exist that this is not right, and so I actively pursue righteousness today from where I'm at? So it gets confusing when you start to do that. But that's why I say, like, this becomes this tangled web that's very confusing. And I don't know how much concern it is when you're trying to live, I guess, differently.
I I'm always surprised. I'm surprised by uh, my own shortcomings, although I'm probably far more familiar with those. But there's something just this is risky to say, but there's something just really that just really tramples our pride, disillusionment. And I don't care if you're talking about the gruesome nature of Hispanics, which we are. I mean, very barbaric,
Oh yeah.
in their
Conquistadors.
in their quest to conquer.
Yeah.
But no more. I mean, and it's hard. It's not. We don't like to talk about it. It's not fun to talk about that at parties. But you know what else isn't fun to talk about? The slave trade in Angola.
Right.
I mean, that's an inconvenient reality. The brokers that made slaves available. Nobody wants to talk about that stuff because it's ugly. Just like us, just like conquistadors.
So what we're saying is
Ugly to talk about it. It dashes our pride because every generation feels that they are so civilized, and yet we're still uncivilized.
but what we can't do is go back and change that. So how do we
This is that we try to. This is why we take down statues. This is why we
oh,
ban books. This is why this is why we do all of these things, because we want to pretend as though that is not so. I mean, so rather than subject ourselves to grappling with disillusionment, let's just rewrite it.
disillusionment is that you're right. And it's like this, it's like creating this third solution that's not exactly effective, because the alternatives are to adjust, adapt your thinking and your aim for the situation as you've come to know it in reality now. That to me feels like a healthy way. The other thing is that's not a healthy way is when you get that sinking heart or dread. Okay, a little of that, but despair. Oh, things will never change. And when you start to say things have always been like this, because I have seen people when we see terrors rise today, oh, well, people did this back at a certain time. Does that mean like you're like I'm not sure if that means so then we have no voice in today, because this has already happened before. It can be confusing, and I think we all have to be looking at the same reality. For me personally, I would say slave holding is immoral and not good for a society. Having said that, my aim would be, if this was like my ultimate drive was to distinguish this, I could go right down to New York City and start helping the enslaved prostitutes and workers. And there's so much to tackle today that we can't grapple with disillusionment that our ancestors maybe faced, where we don't have enough life to sort that out and then come to present day and help those who are today suffering what we say is an impossibility and so wrong. The lowest of low, right?
So, yes, you're right. Let me ask you a question. While not, I don't want to say suffering, because it's not suffering at all. It's finding out or acknowledging that we were disillusioned. That is tragic. But while we are in the midst of our inaccurate assessment, the disillusionment, I mean, what's the good side to that?
Well, I think
We're free. We're unencumbered by reality for a minute.
The good thing about disillusionment is that you have gotten a glimpse of life as it is, and then you're left, at least you're empowered this much. You have a choice. and this is something you and I said again with Seth, while we suffered this horrible disillusionment, you are what you are. What remained was this choice to accept that trial or to kick and scratch and fight against it. It was going to end the same, but the suffering, I have endured horrifying grief, okay? Like the lowest of low grief, but I can't say a suffering that comes from rejecting what just is happening, the reality. No disillusionment, this is happening. Would become suffering if I remove any potential for meaning in it, which has led to us having these talks. And it doesn't need to be complete meaning, but it could even just be the acceptance that there are meanings that exist that I have not yet tapped into. And you don't say it as an exercise to feel better, but like a genuine acceptance. And that's a little bit of denial of what you said, that ego, the pride, where my assumption has never been that I know all, so all must operate the way that I imagine it. It just won't, right?
I'm going to leave you with this.
Mm-hmm.
Disillusionment is only such until it becomes regular practice. We go on vacation because we want to experience the illusion of freedom, not watching clocks.
Yeah.
Prepared meal. We want to do that. Okay. And that's an illusion. We escape our home life to go experience that, because that's not what we're really going to do. We're willing to throw away a year of savings to go for 7 days and live in a way that is an illusion as compared to our home life. However, if you can find a way to incorporate, for me, it's camping. The illusion of freedom was an illusion until it became a regular occurrence.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Is you're truly,
and now that it's a regular occurrence, there's no disillusion about it.
Nice.
Like that's just what I do. Would I like to do it more? You bet. Would I like to do it full time? Probably not. I like it, but I do like getting away. So with that, I think it's good. Let's stop there.
Let's stop while we can. Went into territory we're not used to. So until next time, you can like and share the podcast. You can disagree with us as strongly as you like, which this one may be worth doing. Disillusion us. Open up our eyes.
And keep buying those T-shirts and writing your notes so that we can send them.
Right.
We are just trying to clothe displaced humans,
mm-hmm.
whether they are justifiably moved or moved without justification.
Right.
That's not for us to decide, but we know that there's people that need clothing. There's people that need relief. There's people that need, they just need help.
I'm going to add one thing.
Let's keep writing those notes and buying those T-shirts.
Yeah. I just want to add real quick that's such a profound point. When you see suffering, don't worry about whether it's from somebody's disillusionment or they're justified in suffering. You don't need to balance whether they can justify their suffering. Just help when you see it before you. Until next time, farewell.
Adios.